my source of hope is Christ alone, in Christ
This morning we're discussing a very important topic, which is entitled Adopting a Biblical Perspective and Criticism Against a Believer's Ministry. This topic is being discussed in the light of the two previous sessions that we had in the Sunday Bible School. And the topic we've been discussing for the past 2 weeks in the Sunday Bible School is this: responding biblically to criticisms. But in order to respond biblically to criticisms, we must also have the right perspective, because it is perspective that will give us the direction in order to respond biblically. In short, even before we can respond biblically, we should have the foundation in terms of viewpoint, in terms of points of view, in terms of mindset, in order to respond biblically. So this morning we'll be discussing about adopting a biblical perspective towards responding biblically to criticisms. For those who have not been attending the Sunday School, we have these biblical ways to respond to criticism. First, let us not allow criticism to stop us from serving God. Second, we should always maintain composure even when criticized. Continue on going with the ministry God has given you. The third, even if criticized, we should always keep our conduct above criticism. Fifth, we should be open-minded. We should not be defensive when criticized. Fifth, we should learn from criticism, because whether that criticism is constructive or destructive, chances are that there may be a nugget of truth in it. And last but not least, the biblical way to come up and to confront criticism is always to bring it to God, which is to pray. So this morning we'll discuss the perspective in general of trying to look at it in terms of a mindset, so that this mindset will tell us how to respond to God. Now let me discuss first what do we mean when we say perspective. Latin word of perspective means look through or perceive. All the meanings of perspective have something to do with looking. Tinignan ko sa Tagalog, ano ibig sabihin ng perspective? Ang translation is pananaw. Anong pananaw? Perspective is the way in which things are viewed. It's a way of regarding situations, facts, and so forth, in judging the relative importance. It consists of one's outlook, attitude, or way of looking at things. It is our frame of reference. As they say, if you observe the world from a dog's perspective, you see through the dog's eyes. So that's how important for us to have a biblical perspective and criticism, so that we can look at it or look at them from the biblical perspective, or biblical eyes or perspective. Different individuals have different perspectives. And let me explain to this by using an illustrative example. A man was driving in the country one day. He saw an old man sitting on a fence rail, watching the cars go by. Stopping to pass the time of day, the traveler said, "I never could stand living out here. You don't see anything, and I'm sure you don't travel like I do. I'm on the go all the time. The old man on the fence looked down at the stranger and growled, I can see much difference in what I'm doing and what you're doing. I sit on the fence and watch the autos go by, and you sit in your auto and watch the fences go by. It's just the way you look at things. Different perspectives, different ways of looking at things. Another example. Two men looked out from prison bars. One saw mud, the other saw stars. Every one of us is different. We all have a different way of viewing things. Different individuals, as they say, different perspectives. Now, what is the importance of having a proper perspective? And what is the importance of a believer having a biblical perspective of things, especially in terms of criticism? A shoe manufacturer who decided to open the Congo market sent two salesmen to the undeveloped territory. One salesman cabled back, prospect here, nothing. No one wears shoes. That's one perspective. The other salesman reported enthusiastically, market potential, terrific and very large. Everyone is barefooted, everyone is a potential market for shoes. Importance of perspective, it's how you look at things and it will tell you what to do next. When Goliath came against the Israelites, the soldiers all thought, he's so big, we can never kill him. David looked at the same giant and thought, he's so big, I can beat with my sling. Perspective. It defines the results. An English professor wrote the words, woman without her man is a savage, on the blackboard. He directed his students to punctuate it correctly. The man wrote, woman, comma, without her man, comma, is a savage. The women wrote, woman, exclamation mark, without her, man is a savage. So whoever looks at it, he will be a savage. Now, what is the biblical perspective insofar a believer is concerned? And it is a must that if you are a believer, you have to view things from a biblical perspective. In the biblical sense, perspective means seeing things from God's point of view. In the Bible, the words understanding, the word wisdom, and discernment all have to do with perspective. Adopting a perspective, therefore, means having wisdom, having understanding, and having discernment. Biblical perspective is understanding things from a larger focus, from a larger frame of reference, which is the Bible, God's Word. Proverbs 4:23 states, keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of that heart are the issues of life. The NIV translation says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Guard your perspective, because everything that you do flows from it. Colossians 3:1-2. If ye then be risen with Christ, and this is the imperative why we should adopt a biblical perspective, being Christians. If ye then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ seated on the right hand of God. Set your affection on things above, not on things on earth. That's the biblical perspective. In Psalm 103, verse 7, the people of Israel got to see what God did, but Moses got to understand why God did it. This is the difference between knowledge and perspective. Knowledge is learning what God has said and done. Perspective, on the other hand, is understanding why God said it or did it. And this is our job this morning, to try to understand why we should do things God's way, insofar as criticism is concerned. Now, to help us look into biblical perspective insofar as criticism is concerned, let us look into the dimensions of that perspective. And I refer to it as the 4 E's, the 4 E dimensions of biblical perspective and criticism. This 4 would be this: expect that criticism. The second dimension is examine, evaluate that criticism. The third is endure it. And fourth, entreat God about it. Let's look at the first C, expect criticism. Criticism, expectation, expect to expect in the dictionary is defined as to look forward to regard as likely to happen, and to anticipate the occurrence or the coming of. That's the definition of expect. We expect criticism, and it should come our way. It's but natural. Why? Because we all make mistakes all of the time. It is human nature. We are not perfect. Every person has flaws and defects. As Elbert Hubbard says, to avoid criticism, do nothing, say nothing, be nothing. But that is not what a believer is supposed to do in this world. He should be a spiritual difference maker. He has the Great Commission given to him. So we're not supposed to do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing, because we want to avoid criticism. So definitely, that's not the biblical way. We all know we cannot hide from criticism. It's a fact of life. James 3:2 says, "For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able also to bridle the whole body." James 3:2. We expect criticism as believers because we are followers of Christ. We experience criticism as we endeavor to walk by faith. A.W. Tozer says, "To be right with God has often meant to be in trouble with men." And that trouble oftentimes comes to criticism. John 16:33, our Lord Himself giving us the warning that we should expect criticisms. "These things I have spoken unto you, that in me you might have peace. In the world you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world." John 16:33. Critics may try to tear us down when we attempt to honor God. And this is seen in Nehemiah 4:1-2. And I quote, "Now when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, he was angry and greatly enraged, and he jeered at the Jews. And he said, in the presence of his brothers and of the army of Samaria, what are these feeble Jews doing?" Criticizing. "Will they restore it for themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they finish up in a day? Will they revive the stones out of the heaps of rubbish and barn ones?" So that expect criticism, especially when you are attempting to honor God. Another reason why we should expect criticism. Criticism might be a confirmatory sign of our own faithfulness to Christ. God can use people to tell us where we have gone wrong. Sometimes we may think too highly of ourselves. Maybe that's why people criticize us, as to think we can do no wrong. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man is he who listens to counsel. We may need the counsel, and it may be initiated by a criticism. Proverbs 12:15. Criticism can come from God to others, and that it is a discipline, may be designed and given out of God's love in order for us to grow. Proverbs 13:3, 11, 12. My son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. For whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth, even as a father the son in whom he delighteth. Correction may come in the form of criticism. A story is told of the British preacher John Wesley, who was riding alone in his horse when he realized that several days had gone by and he had not suffered any persecution, even criticism. For 3 days, not a brick or an egg had been thrown in his direction, which apparently was a common practice when Wesley would get up to preach. So he got off his horse and cried out, "Could it be that I have sinned and am not backslidden?" Then he got down and finished. He asked God to show him if there was anything wrong in his life spiritually. Meantime, a man was watching and listening to all this. He thought, "The preacher is crazy. I will show him." He picked up a brick and threw it at Wesley, just missing the head. But when Wesley saw the brick, he jumped up and he said, "Thank God, everything is okay. I still have peace." I could not read it because it's in black. I still have His presence. Add to this fact, we should expect criticism in our lives because we have an adversary who opposes all the good plans that the Lord has for us. 1 Peter 4:12 says, and warns us, "Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you." 1 Peter 4:12. To expect means to anticipate the occurrence of something that's coming. And to anticipate means also to be prepared. Because we anticipate criticism, we are not surprised and get hooked emotionally when it comes. We tend to be less defensive. We accept it with an open mind. We are less sensitive. We can work on accepting our flaws and being able to hear about some areas where we can improve. We can focus on the message and its intention to help us instead of focusing on all of the mean and hurtful things that were said to us. Because we anticipate all these criticisms, we can work on controlling our emotions. We don't have to tear up every time someone says a negative word. We tend to understand also what we are being really told if we expect these criticisms. We understand the message behind it. We could break it down so that we can start figuring what that criticism is all about. When we expect criticism, we're open to see if there's some truth to it. We can refuse to let the negativity in our lives look into our hearts. With expectation, if we expect it and anticipate it, we could listen to the criticism even from so-called enemies. The opinions of our enemies, says one wise person, come nearer to the truth about us than do our own opinions. And because we anticipate that criticism coming because of us being believers, we should not be afraid, nor dismayed. Deuteronomy 3:31-8 tells us, "And the Lord, He is that doth go before thee. He will be with thee. He will not fail thee, neither forsake thee. Fear not, neither be dismayed." Deuteronomy 31:8. So as we expect criticism, we should not be afraid. We should not be dismayed. 1 John 5:4 gives us the affirmation on this. "For whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world. And this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith." 1 John 5:4. The way we respond to criticism pretty much depends on the way we respond to praise. If praise humbles us, then criticism will build us up. But if praise inflates us, then criticism will crush us. And both responses lead to our defeat. That's Warren Wiersbe talking. The second dimension of that perspective is we should allow ourselves to examine and evaluate whatever criticism that comes our way. Criticism may not be agreeable, but we should look at it as necessary. Criticism, says Winston Churchill, fulfills the same function as pain in the body. It calls attention to an unhealthy state of things. If we have this perspective, then we can be more open to criticism. If we look at it as similar to pain in our body, giving us the early warning system to tell us what's wrong in us. Criticism is sometimes needed, and of course, never wanted. So the question isn't, will I be criticized? As we said, the first thing, expect it. You will always be criticized. But the more relevant question is this: how can I handle criticism constructively? We have to admit that there may be the nugget of truth in any criticism thrown at us. The challenge is determining whether that criticism is fair or unfair, accurate or inaccurate, destructive or constructive. That's why the second dimension, we have to examine, we have to evaluate, and not dismiss often such criticism. We must therefore not be stubborn and refuse to consider such criticism. And we do this by listening, examining, and evaluating. The criticism might be correct, for all we know. Sometimes our critics will see blind spots in ourselves, which we ourselves cannot see. So let us be open to examining and evaluating any criticism. And this is the second dimension: evaluate and examine in an objective and detached manner. The way we handle criticism is a clue to where we are spiritually. The way in which we hear people tells us a great deal about our spiritual maturity. More than that, the way in which we receive criticism is a measure of how Christ is growing in us. Paul spoke to the church at Ephesus about handling criticism effectively. According to him, it is only in honest examination that we can truly know the real nature of criticism. There's the story of a man who was taking a journey with his grandson by donkey. And he had only one donkey, and the road took him through 5 villages to get home. He put the boy on the donkey and walked alongside. The first village criticized, saying, "Look at that healthy young boy, making that old man walk." He couldn't take the criticism, so he switched places with the boy. The second village also criticized. "Look at that, a healthy grown man, making a little boy walk." He could not take it, so they both got on the donkey. The third village said, that's animal abuse, having two of them and that one little donkey. So they both started walking. That's the third village. The fourth village said, can you believe it? Two people walking when they have a perfectly good donkey. You'd think one of them would have sense enough to get on and ride. The old man had had enough, so guess what he did? He came to the fifth village, and what did the people see? The boy was walking, the man was walking, and they were carrying. Criticism. This type of criticism, do we give time or opportunity to evaluate and examine instead of reacting immediately, quickly, without thinking? And this is the second dimension of the perspective on criticism. Give time to examine, to evaluate. Is it destructive? Is it destructive? Can it be useful to me? The question, therefore, is we ask ourselves, how do we proceed with this examination or evaluation? By asking ourselves these four questions. The first question in our evaluation or examination, how was the criticism given? Did the critic give the benefit of the doubt, or was he judgmental? Has he already formed an opinion even before he issued that criticism? Was he really seeking honest answers and information, or has he already come to a conclusion? How was the criticism given? Was it delivered in a judgment? As Maxwell pointed out, if you look closely at the criticism, you can usually determine if the person who delivered it wishes you well or does not wish you well. Obviously, if there seems to be envy or malice or any other negative intent behind a critical comment, there's a good chance that it's meant to be destructive rather than constructive. The second question is, when was it given? Was it in public or private? Was it given out of anger or after a time when moods and emotions had died down? The third question we ask is, why is it given? Was it for our benefit or theirs? What was their agenda? Romans 14:1 advises us, welcome with open mind, fellow believers who don't see things the way you do, and don't jump all over them every time they do or say something you do not agree with, even when it seems they're strong on opinions, but weak in the faith department. Remember, they have their own history to deal with. Treat them gently. That's the translation of message. The biblical approach, therefore, for examining or evaluating criticism. We look at Paul. Paul knew this when he wrote Timothy about handling criticism. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, he said, and the servant of the Lord must not strive, must not quarrel, but be gentle unto all men, up to peace, patient. 2 Timothy 2:25 also affirms this advice of Paul. In meekness, instructing those that oppose themselves, if God peradventure will give them repentance to the acknowledging of the truth. Proverbs 15:1-2 advises us also in this second dimension. A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. The tongue of the wise useth knowledge aright, but the mouth of the fools poureth out foolishness. Proverbs 15:1-2. The third dimension of that perspective is endure. Endure in the dictionary means to hold out against, to sustain without impairment or yielding. Once there was a politician who did the best he could. But being human, he made mistakes and was criticized. Reporters wrote about his errors in the newspaper. Well, he became so upset that he drove out into the countryside to visit his dear friend, a farmer. What am I going to do? The politician asks. I've tried so hard. Nobody has tried harder than I have to do more good for our people. And look how they criticize me. But the old farmer could hardly hear the complaint of his persecuted friend because his hound dog was barking up a storm at the full moon. The farmer rebuked his dog, but the dog kept barking. Finally, the farmer said to the politician, "Do you want to know how you should handle your unfair critics? Here's how. Listen to that dog. Now look up at the moon. And remember that people will keep yelling at you. They'll nip at your heels and they'll criticize you. But here's the lesson. The dog keeps howling, but the moon keeps shining." As we endure the criticisms against us, we remain the shining moon while the dogs are howling at us. The only opinion that really matters, in fact, is God's. If we are right with God, who else matters? As we endure, so long as our identity and security rest solely and completely in Christ, we can count on the fact that our true security will be exposed when we receive criticism. Thus, we should reflect the love of Christ to our detractors and critics. We drown our detractors and critics in kindness. We do not stoop down to their level. Our biblical reference, 1 Peter 2:23, who, when he was reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. Peter referring to Christ. 1 Peter 2:3. Here's another story. You like these stories? Colonel George Washington, what else, was the man responsible for completing the Panama Canal. In the process, he had big problems with the climate and the geography. Thousands of workers died. However, his biggest challenge was the growing criticism back home from those who predicted he would never finish the project. Finally, a colleague asked him, "Aren't you going to answer these critics?" "In time," answered Bottas. "When?" his partner asked. "When the canal is finished." Let's answer our critics with our work, with our ministry, not with our words. It's the most powerful argument we can have against any criticism. So as we endure, our response is the key to the entire situation. And we are in control of the situation, not our critics. How we react is a reflection on our character, not theirs. I like this point, and I'm sure it's familiar to you. People are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish or ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some false friends and some true enemies. Succeed anyway. People may cheat you. Be honest and frank anyway. What you spend years building, someone could destroy overnight. Build anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today, people will often forget tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it may never be enough. Give the world the best you got anyway. You see, in the final analysis, it's between you and God. It's never between you and them anyway. So endure whatever criticism anyway. Ephesians 4:2 tells us, with all lowliness and meekness, with long-suffering, forbearing one another in love, Paul advising us to have endurance in this type of attacks. Joshua 1:9, there's comfort in this admonition. Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest, even against the most bitter criticism. Colossians 3:13, another admonition. Bear with each other, and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. The fourth element, I hope you still remember the other three. The fourth dimension, entreat God. What's the meaning of entreat? Entreat is asking for something that is really important. So, in a sense, this is stronger than prayer. Prayer is asking God, but if you entreat God, you ask for something that's very important. And the question we ask is why? Because in these instances, we entreat God because we are aware of the significance of how we handle criticism properly, especially its impacts on our spiritual difference-making efforts in terms of our own spiritual growth, firstly, in terms of our testimony with others, and in terms of our relationships with fellow believers. On our own, it will be difficult to get a biblical perspective on criticism. That's why we entreat God, we pray to God, underscoring the fact that this is a very important matter insofar as executing our Great Commission is concerned. This was what Nehemiah did. Nehemiah asked God to take care of his critics. In Nehemiah 4:4, he prayed, "Hear, O God, for we are despised, and turn their reproach upon their own head, and give them for a prey in the land of captivity." Nehemiah 4:4. The very first thing Nehemiah does is to go to God in prayer. In spite, because of these criticisms, because of these attacks from Sanballat. Nehemiah is saying, God, it is in your hands. Please fight the battle for me. And here are some suggestions that don't forget their sins. Turn their insults back at them. And God did start fighting the battle for Nehemiah. This is the same approach that David adopted. David listened to the criticism. In fact, he learned from it. But mostly important, he trusted God about it. In 2 Samuel 16, verse 12, it may be that the Lord will look on mine affliction, and that the Lord will requite me good for his cursing this day. During his hasty retreat from Absalom, David encountered a man named Shimei, who was walking on a hillside. From where he stood, Shimei began to curse David and throw stones and dirt at him. David was flanked on the right and the left by loyal members of his administration, and they were getting hit with stones as well. The response of David's guard, Abishai, was to ask permission from David to silence Shimei. Abishai wanted to do so by cutting off Shimei's head. That would certainly stop the criticism. But silencing the critics by cutting his head off is not exactly God's way of handling the situation. Retaliation is usually our knee-jerk response, but not one that God wants from us. In contrast to Abishai, David responded with patience and discernment. He recognized that somehow his apparent fall from power was a part of God's sovereign plan, and that God would deal with Shimei and others like him. David's response to Shimei surely went against the grain, the natural reaction that we have against criticisms. And therefore his gut reaction to Shimei was likely the same as Abishai's. However, David elected to bring the whole matter to God. This is also exactly what David did when he fought Goliath. All the time that David is picking up those stones and getting his sling ready, he was saying, "The battle is the Lord's, it's not mine." To Goliath, this made no sense at all. What is this little guy saying about the battle is the Lord's? But about that time, right between his eyes, that was the end of Goliath, because the battle belonged to God, and God gave David the victory in that single step. Psalm 55 verse 22 says, "Cast your cares unto the Lord, and He will sustain you. He will never let the righteous fall." So that's our assurance when we treat God however severe, however unfair, however destructive the criticism. Psalm 55:22 comforts us. We cast our cares on the Lord, and He will sustain us. He will never let the righteous fail. In closing, let me quote Teddy Roosevelt, former president of the U.S. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled over the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. Far better it is to dare mighty things to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much, because they live in the great twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat. Let's get inspiration from this quotation and be walkers to the Lord in spite of these critics who just follow or just around us. It's us, God's workers, that come. Thank you. God bless.